some of us in this room would say the largest problem is anti-Semitism. Some of us in the room would say the largest problem is losing Jewish identity, losing our ties with the Jewish community, getting assimilated and getting dissolved in other cultures, losing our cultural and religious ties to Judaism. So there will be some people that will say the largest danger is always from outside, anti-Semitism. Other people will say the largest danger is from inside, it's the loss of Jewish identity. I heard a great Rabbi Steinsaltz, a few years ago say something very important. He says, you know, the danger of anti-Semitism is a great danger. But if you look back in the history of the Jewish people, we can almost say that anti-Semitism was almost always much stronger than today. And you don't have to go back just 70 years, go back 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, 400 years. Inquisition, there was almost never such an era when Jews were so respected, when we can have the Minister of Justice, maybe in France, because here for 200 years we have freedom. But this could never exist before. So it's a problem, but maybe this is not the largest problem. Assimilation, losing our identity, it's also a problem. But on the other hand, you have many people that are connected to Judaism through the State of Israel, through Zionism, through other issues. And also, he says, assimilation is a large problem, but throughout history it always existed. Unfortunately, we lost millions of Jews in the times of the Greeks. When we celebrate Hanukkah, this is what we remember. He says, you know what's the largest danger to the present and the future of the Jewish people? Is indifference. Indifference. The people don't care. Everything goes. There is no stakes at high. Nothing matters. And this is a problem, which is a problem not only for Jewish people, it's a problem all over. He says, look at the Jewish history in Europe, in France. 800 years ago, in times of Rashi, Rabbi Slomó Yitzchaki, one of the largest and most famous Jewish rabbis of France from 800, 900 years ago. How many Jews lived in France then? 3,000? 4,000? How many Jews live today in France? 400,000? And how many Rashis do they have today in France? None. Back then, Rashi was just one of the Chachamim. Was just one in many. Why is this difference? Because people don't care. It's indifference, and that's the word. That's the largest danger. Don't let ourselves to be indifferent. We have to care. We have to know that every action counts. We have to know that every person, whether you're Jewish, you're non-Jewish, you're religious, non-religious, if you do a good deed, that makes a difference. And don't be indifferent. And this is why I think what Mr. Mergui mentioned today about this center really touched me. He mentioned that when they announced the building in 2012, it was just a few days before the terrible terror attacks in Toulouse. This is horrible, terrible attacks. And they had, and you guys had an argument here, whether or not to make this center. And what, in the argument, some people said there's no future for Jews in France. What did President Mergui say and his people? We can only fight this hatred not by running away, by turning away our heads, but we can only fight this hatred and we can only fight darkness if we add light. And this is what this center represents. And this is why, just on the last note, I mentioned these two stories. A story of a Hungarian Jew who is way assimilated. A story of a Hungarian Jew who is afraid to be Jewish because of anti-Semitism. These things are connected, and the only way we can fight it if we are sure that we never become indifferent to what goes on around us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Köves. Occasionally, and all too rarely in life, ladies and gentlemen, we come across someone who just gets it, who can sum up in a few sentences what's going on, and who seems to encapsulate so succinctly and accurately what you're feeling, but it's like they're articulating what's in your heart and mind, but that you find very hard to distill yourself into some kind of coherent argument. A few weeks ago, we were sitting in a planning meeting of this conference, and one of my colleagues, Michel Gourari, who you probably know, pulled out a news cutting from the Jerusalem Post. This colleague, Michel, who's not usually in the habit of doing this, then slipped it over to me across the table without actually saying a word. Without saying a word back, I nodded, because I too had read this piece. And we knew, both of us, that you had to hear from this person too. Let me share a few words of this piece. World leaders have come together at Yad Vashem and Auschwitz in commemoration of humanity's darkest chapter. They've pledged never again to the atrocities of a Holocaust. But now the motorcades have departed. Where will there be action to stem the growing tide of anti-Semitism? Because so far, the strong words of never again have been met with meek indifference across the whole of society. At a time when Jews are leaving European countries due to this threat, the alarm bells should be ringing loudly in presidential palaces and in our own living room. I bet there isn't a single person in this room who didn't just metaphorically nod their head or say an amen to that. The article then set out a manifesto for change, a manifesto that I won't go into myself, because this great person who wrote it is here with us this evening. Suffice to say that it is, without a doubt in my mind, one of the sharpest, most incisive and accurate summaries of where we find ourselves today and what governments across this great continent must do to stop the scourge, of anti-Semitism that is blighting our society. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great honor and privilege to welcome to the stage the former Secretary General of NATO, the former Prime Minister of Denmark, and the Chairman of the Alliance of Democracies Foundation, Mr. Anders Fogh Rasmussen. Mr. Rasmussen, please join us.
Madame la Ministre, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor to address you this evening. And I'm delighted to see so many old friends and some new ones in the audience. But first of all, I wish to thank Rabbi Margolin, Monsieur Mergui, the European Jewish Association, and the Consistoire Central for organizing this event. And I congratulate the Consistoire Central on the construction of this new European Center for Judaism. I know it has been a few decades in the making, but this center is much more than bricks and mortar. It serves as a powerful symbol to all Europeans, as a beacon of worship, education, and understanding. Most importantly, this building delivers a signal that Jews have made their home in France and they are not leaving. I wish to address my comments this evening to the theme of your conference, Jews in Europe, united for a better future. And unity in the Jewish community is essential. It goes without saying that all Jews have a common cause in fighting anti-Semitism. anti-Semitism. It is a cause that must rise above all other rivalries, personalities, and politics. But it is not only Jews who must be united for a better future. We must all be united for a better future. Jews, Christians, Muslims, those of all faith and none, everyone who values freedom. Because anti-Semitism is foremost an attack on Jews, but it is also an attack on our free and tolerant societies. So, every European who values their freedom has a common cause with Europe's Jews, uniting to fight this cancer. As Niemöller's confession reads, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. These words underline an uncomfortable truth for all of us. There are no innocent bystanders in this fight. All of us, inside this room and outside of it, must stand up for the values that we hold dear, values which are under attack from prejudice, under attack from indifference, under attack from ignorance. During my public life as Danish Prime Minister and NATO Secretary General, my overriding mission was to defend freedom and democracy. And I continue to be driven by these goals. And today, anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine of our societies. The canary is dying, and we need to act now. We see warning signs everywhere that our pluralistic and tolerant communities are in a decay. The post-Cold War II consensus is being questioned. Unless the silent majority speaks up, rule of law will be replaced by rule of the mob. And I refuse to stand by and let that happen without a fight, which is why I am committing to stepping up my work in the fight against anti-Semitism. In 2017, I created the Alliance of Democracies Foundation. Our objective is to strengthen the forces of freedom and democracy at a time when dark forces are rising. I have asked the Alliance of Democracies Foundation to focus more of its work on fighting anti-Semitism, because the fight against anti-Semitism and the fight for freedom are the same side of the coin. I'm spurred to action because the situation across this continent has reached danger point. Europe has forgotten its lesson from history. A recent EU survey showed that 89% of Jews feel anti-Semitism has increased in their country. Even in Germany, anti-Semitism is back on the rise. A country that really should know better. But across Europe, we see a similar trend. Here in France, attacks have increased. 37% of French Jews say they refrain from wearing Jewish symbols. In the UK, many Jews recently questioned whether to remain had the general election gone another way. In my own country of Denmark, we have seen violence, including the murder of a guard at a Copenhagen synagogue. There are many different drivers of this anti-Semitism, from extremism of the far right to the spillover of anti-Zionism on the far left, to those who ignorantly hold all Jews responsible for the decisions of the Israeli government. But while there may be different drivers in different communities, the solutions are similar Europe-wide. My friends, the question today is not whether European leaders stand in Yad Vashem and in Auschwitz and proclaim never again. The question is, what actions will we all take to make sure never again does not become once again? And here I have three thoughts. Firstly, we must clearly and uniformly define anti-Semitism. The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition should be enacted in law across Europe so that anti-Semitic acts are enforceable. And secondly, to quote my old friend Tony Blair, education, education, education. Young people get their information and news online, a realm where facts and alternative facts are interchangeable and the filters of mainstream media are bypassed. Young people who do not understand history are bound to repeat it, because nobody is born anti-Semitic. But unwitting people can be made frightened by the unknown. And they can be convinced that a certain group of people is responsible for the challenges they face. The poor living standards, the lack of jobs. It's too easy to say that this is just because Jews control the capitalist system. And increasingly today, we see efforts to rewrite history, even the history of World War II itself. Historical revisionism can be a path to anti-Semitism, because ignorance is a breeding ground for the disease of anti-Semitism. Education, facts about history and cultures is the cure. And thirdly, we must mobilize the silent majority to overpower the noisy minority. I believe that a Europe-wide campaign against anti-Semitism should activate everyone with a platform and a voice. Celebrities, social media influencers, sportsmen and women, and all community and faith leaders. This fight needs to be taken out beyond the political and the Jewish communities. In particular, we must work together with the Muslim communities. Across Europe, Muslims are also the victims of misunderstanding and prejudice. We should find better ways to reach out to them. In particular, we cannot let political correctness stand in the way of the robust discussion we need. Let's leave the political correctness to the Swedes. Addressing taboos also includes addressing head-on the indoctrination of latent anti-Semitism in some first-generation Muslim migrants. These are discussions that we must have fully and frankly. But in the mainstream politics, it cannot be left to the extremes. We can step up work within Muslim communities to teach them the truth about Jewish culture, to overcome the lifetime of fake news that many have been subjected to. But first and foremost, we need concrete action. We do not need more talk shops. And we should focus on the young generation. We should use new channels to reach young people and communicate with them. Ladies and gentlemen, these are just a few of my initial thoughts. Many of you will have given much more thought to this topic, and I look forward to engaging with you all and hearing your views in the months and years ahead. But I believe we need action before it's too late. Government must do more, that's clear. But we will only defeat anti-Semitism when the whole of society takes a stand. Because the fight against anti-Semitism cuts to the heart of our societies, to the principle that you can openly be who you are and worship as you wish, and you will be protected and celebrated. If we lose this cornerstone of society, then freedom itself will begin to unravel. Niemöller's confession will repeat itself again. I'm not a Jew, nobody's perfect, but I promise you that I will speak out so that one day they do not come for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rasmussen, for taking the time to be with us here this evening. We hope that every political leader takes a leaf out of your book and calls it just as you've called it. You're doing important work. You have our thanks and support. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it from me for now. We hope you enjoy your main course. I'll be back after to continue. Bon appétit once again.